Good morning, everyone. Does good economics make for bad politics even if you have a full majority? The first major reform by the Narendra Modi government on land acquisition has run into a storm in parliament and out on the streets. Can the BJP government find a way of selling good economics to voters and bring the country back on track, or will good economics continue to suffer at the altar of electoral politics? Joining us at the 14th India Today conclave are three key figures who are instrumental in the challenge of bringing the country back on track. Ladies and gentlemen, at the India Today conclave, join me in welcoming this morning. I want to begin by introducing Union Railways Minister, Mr. Suresh Prabhu. Minister for Road Transport, Nitin Gadkari. And the government's new Chief Economic Advisor, Arvind Subramaniam. And I want to ask Nitin Gadkari first. Sir, does good economics necessarily make for bad politics?
Good economics is very much helpful for the politics because there is different type of politics. Some politics is individual benefit politics. And sometime with good economic policies, you can give benefit to the crores of people. Just take an example of e-rickshaw. The 1 crore poor people who related with the business, the government has taken a decision to support them, by which really it will be helpful for the poor people. And that good policy is ultimately helpful to the government. So sometimes it is depending upon the policies and decisions of good economics, which is how it is going to help the poor people. And that is really positive thing for the government.
So you're talking about e-rickshaws, I'm talking about land acquisition. A major reform which all economists here, industrialists here, we've got Mr. Adani here, several other top industrialists, they'll say this is a much needed economic reform. If the country needs to grow, we have to make it easier for industry to acquire land. And yet you've seen the storm out in the streets. Your party today perceived as a pro-corporate party, as a party of the rich. So how do you resolve this contradiction between good economics and politics?
It is somewhere image versus reality. Actually, for some period I was rural development minister, and in my file I have got the letter from the all chief ministers and the all political parties, those who are constantly demanding me about the changes of the Land Acquisition Act. Already 105, the law, already the central government, UPA government at that time, exempted 13 acts from this consent clause and socio-economic assessment, SIA. It is by UPA. And the 13 laws are Coal Act, coal acquisition, mineral, then railway, the road, all major acquisition is related with it. 18% of the land acquisition is for the irrigation, which is in the interest of the poor. The only our government has taken a decision about only three things, about the rural infrastructure. It is the village connectivity, drinking water, some power transformer, other thing, we need the land in the village, and schools, hospitals, government hospitals in the village. I never understand how it is going to against the rural people. And you understand one thing, in Punjab the irrigation is 98.2%, in Maharashtra it is 16.7%, and the lowest in the country, Jharkhand, is 5.6%. And if you want to construct a big dam, if there is 5,000 acres of land for this dam, and if you need 80% people permission for it, how it is possible? No one will give the permission. It means you don't want to do any irrigation project. It is not at all against anybody, against any rural agriculture people. It is the perception of the media. Some people perceive that it is against it. And I'm just telling you, I am challenging to the media in my press conference in Delhi and Mumbai. And I'm again challenging all of you. Any of you just prove anything which is against the farmers, against the rural economy, against the village, anything, if you can prove it, I am ready to discuss with anybody. It is totally wrong.
But Mr. Prabhu, one of the problems for the BJP in this particular instance is that your party was a part of the bill that was moved and passed in Parliament, which you now seek to change. Do you see a fundamental contradiction between good economics and good politics? Can they be reconciled, and how?
I don't know which party you really meant, but the BJP is the party which believes that politics comes later, country comes first. Whatever we really do in the country, politics is subservient to it. So rather than saying whether good politics is good economics or other way around, I would say any good politics that you pursue, whatever is in the national interest, that's good politics. And therefore, no country can ever develop unless you have good economics into place. So therefore, whatever policies you try to put in place, if they are in the interest of the country, they're definitely good politics and good economics as well. And that's a good example of that, that's what we have been trying to do in the last 9 months. If you really look at it, all the policies that government has really undertaken, and the Prime Minister's initiatives that we really look at them in the long-term perspective as well as the short-term solution that we really need to address for today's country's problem, whether it's Swachh Bharat, whether it's Make in India, whether it's Digital India, whether it is Skilling India, emphasis on infrastructure, something like what Mr. Nitin Gadkari is doing despite all the odds, trying to create 30, 40 kilometers of road every day in the next few years' time, is phenomenal. And therefore, I personally feel that whatever we are doing today is all is enmeshed into one, that good politics and good economics, because it's good for the country.
Okay. Sir, as someone who was on the outside till very recently and now finds himself in the midst of this complex government machinery, what do you make of this, whether good economics can make for good politics?
Yeah, I think, so I'm not a politician, I'm a technocrat, and I think it's fair to say that the Indian economic situation, over the last many years, I mean, we've not realized our potential because good economics has not been good politics. And that's just the fact. But what has happened over the last 10, 15 years, and I think culminating in the last election, what you see more and more, and this is some research work done by people, is that more and more governments that deliver, good in terms of good governance or economic growth, low inflation, they are more likely to get elected either. So bad governments are likely to get thrown out, and good governments are likely to be retained. So that's a very healthy sign in Indian politics. Because remember, the hope for us, our country, is that eventually good economics becomes good politics, because we have a democratic polity, and that's going to be the source of our, change, performance, everything. So the good news in India, and I think the 2014 election was a very good example of people saying we want good governance, and so what's heartening is that this change is happening at a more fundamental political level, and that's the good news. But that's not to say that we've conquered it completely. There are still a lot of policies which need to be changed, which are not changed because they are perceived not to be good politics. I think that's very important. I think politicians still think that some good economic things are electoral liabilities, but I think that's changing. The perception has to change, and it is changing over time.
But in the midst of all of this, there is the 2015 election, where the Aam Aadmi Party sweeps to power, riding on a bunch of bad economic promises, which seem to make fabulous economics, where Mr. Gadkari's party is reduced to 3 seats, even though they're saying that you can't get anything free, you need to pay, we'll improve the quality of water, we'll improve the quality of power, but people seem to like the idea of free bijli and free pani.
Yeah, my response to that would be, don't overinterpret from one election. I think you have to observe these things over a period of time. Who knows what might happen to this party? Who knows what voters might say 2 years down the road. I think fundamentally, good parties and good economics requires a longer term perspective. And then once you deliver over the medium or longer term, I think India is showing more and more that voters are smart. They see what is good governance and good performance, and they reward you in the polls.
Manishankar Iyer told us once here at the conclave that you can never win an election through good economics. You have to be politically savvy to be able to win. So, Mr. Gadkari, does a party like the Aam Aadmi Party challenge the BJP's attempt to pursue good economics, where they promise everything free? Mr. Prabhu says, tickets of railway ticket prices cannot go down, even though diesel prices have come down. Our finances are in a bad state. But regardless of the state of finances, Arvind Kejriwal says, I'll give you free electricity, I'll give you free water.
I feel that you should give them some time for it. It will not be appropriate to analyze it because to give everything free of charge, it is really easy to declare. But to implement it in a state or central government, it is very difficult. Because the financial constraints we are facing everywhere. And in such a situation, we have really a financial problem in the state government, central government. In a situation, if you start giving water and electricity free of charge, really it will be a very difficult task for the state governments. But it is a popular politics. Give some time, wait and watch. You will get the answer of all this.
For voters, Mr. Prabhu, does the idea of getting everything free appeal more than the idea of having to pay for it?
You know, this is a really challenging times for a policymaker. If you look at it, we are a very complex society. In what you see in this audience and what we are all sitting here, we look at India in a different way. The India has many different status of society. So, you know, what really is needed to be done there for the policymaker challenge is that we realize that what is good in the long term, but how do you actually bring some result in a short term? So any reform that you bring in, normally the benefits are back-ended and the pain is front-ended. You need to explain to the people that pain is something which has to precede a gain. But that's something to explain in a very proper communicative way is a challenge. I'll give an example of, you mentioned about power, that's why I'm saying that. When I was the power minister, this was the challenge. Because whenever we wanted to bring in reform, the beginning was because the prices were so low, the tariffs were so low, that you had to first increase the tariff. So people thought the reform is increasing tariff. So who is going to support the reform? Then we had to actually package it in a way. I had about 2,500 road shows all over India. This is unprecedented. To explain to the people what is power sector reform. What is the result of this today? We had only 1 lakh megawatt of installed capacity in 2002. Today we have 2,60,000 megawatts of capacity, and in the next 3-4 years, the capacity and implementation will reach 500,000 megawatts of capacity. Prices have come down, or coming down, people will benefit, but to begin with, there was a pain which had to explain to the people. Now, therefore, what I'm saying is that's a challenge for the policymaker. How do you actually factor this particular issue into place? You know, like take power. If you can give, we can give free power without any problem. If you can generate free power. If you have a technology to generate free power, we can actually give free power. In fact, as farmers' organization, I met all of them. And they told me that we don't want free power because we know free power is no power. Now, this is something which we really need to explain to the people. What is necessary? What is the expectation of common man? No common man is expecting free power. He wants power at a reasonable rate. And what is reasonable is a relative term. And that's why the government has to come in, and therefore the element of subsidy comes in. Those who feel that subsidy should not be given are completely away from the reality. In a situation like India, where there are a large number of people living below the poverty line, how can you say there should not be any subsidy for anything? Subsidy is an element which is the difference between affordability and desirability. And therefore, we really need to factor that into play. What is important is, and that is where the economists like my good friend Arvind Subramanian will always be saying, target the subsidies. And that is why the government is doing, in fact, Jan Dhan Yojana, one of the most successful programs in the world, which has now brought in universal banking operations for all the people of India in such a record time from 15th August to 26th of January, as the Prime Minister said. Now, we could transfer some of this amount to the people who need that subsidy. But point I'm saying is, it is true that people in the short term do not realize it. They could be swayed by slogans to make sure that we work in the long-term interest of the people. What a mother would do? Mother would not just cater to the demands of the child. He will not give what child wants, but will give child what he needs. And that's the challenge for the policymaker, how to convert wants and needs together. And that's what we need to do.
Thank you.
Mr. Narendra Modi was here on the same stage at the India Today conclave some time back, and he said that the government, frankly, has no business of being in government. This was a very strong argument made from an electoral pulpit. But after you've come to government, Mr. Gadkari, we haven't seen the Modi government announce that we want to shut down or we want to privatize Air India, for example. Mr. Puri spoke about it during his inaugural address. The hotels, Ashoka Hotel, for example. Why can't this government use the majority that it has and announce some big-ticket reform measure which would really signal to the outside world that this government is serious about not being in business?
I feel that already the policy of the government is also in the same direction. Lot of decision. In my own department, there were some companies of shipbuilding in Calcutta, then Dredging Corporation, other lot of things. We have decided to close it. And now we are finding out...
How many companies are you closing, sir?
Yes.
How many?
2 companies in my department. And already we have taken a decision to find out a joint venture partner with a good technology by which he can contribute for the development of this country. So I'm offering that. In Calcutta also we have got the 2 projects are there. So the policy is that definitely we have to go into that directions, but it will take some time. एक कहा जाता है हमारा जिसका राजा व्यापारी उसकी जनता भिखारी. So government is not supposed to do the business. They are supposed to run the government with the policies. And the policy making is the basic responsibility of the government. So in the same direction our government is working.
No, but for example, there were some expectations, Mr. Prabhu, from your railway budget that you would announce some form of privatization in the railways. Not necessarily the entire railways, but at least, for example, some trains where private players could come and run those trains. Why can't we have on the same tracks? It's something you've spoken of earlier, but why can't we actually see it happen? Private players running some trains on some stretches of the Indian railway network.
You know, we should move away from ideology. We think privatization is solution to all problems. We are wrong. But we say that government control is a solution to all problems. Again, we are wrong. What we really need to do is we should find out what will be deliverable and why it is to be delivered. If we know the outcome, then the ideology becomes irrelevant. If we really know that what that outcome is going to come from what process, that process then becomes important because that outcome is important for us. Rather than getting into ideology, then that becomes problem. Let's tell me our railways. I said in my railway budget speech that we need 8,50,000 crores in the next 5 years as investment from railways. The question is whether we need that money or not. Not me. The railways need that money or not. If the railway need that money, then the second question is, an obvious answer is, how to find that money? Not to find out whether it's a dream or what, but find out reality. That if railways need it, and others have said it when they're minister that they need it, but now it's you feel dream, then it's not going to work. So how to find that money? I actually announced, luckily, within 1 week, 10 days of signing the railway budget, 1,50,000 crores from LIC for 30 years time frame to be repaid in 30 years. Very low interest rate, just adjusted to the GSEC, that government security rate, and that money will be available for railways. We are finding money from multilateral agencies. My own finance minister has decided to give us money, and he agrees with that because that's the priority for the railway. So money is available. Now the question is, if the money is available, we rather use that money, make that investment while other investors will like to come in. If I just wait for an ideology to say that this is a project in which only private sector can come in, only public sector can come in, the railways will keep suffering, passengers will keep suffering. So we first identify the need for investment. We really decide why we need that investment, find out whatever source is possible to make that investment. If the surgery is needed, then you don't decide whether to surgery in government hospital or a private hospital, this doctor, that doctor, this is an emergency. So you first make that surgery and then go in for privatization or non-privatization a little later.
Are you scared of the unions, especially the railway unions, Mr. Prabhu?
Sorry?
Are you scared of the railway unions? The fact
Not
that
at
if you
all.
make any noise which indicates that there might be some form of privatization in the railways, that they might go on strike.
You know, first of all, I was reading yesterday, I replied to the railway discussion yesterday. Almost all ministers before me, and I quoted them from the budget speech, they have been talking about the same language. So sometimes I understand that when you change your treasury position to other position, you have to change your thinking. I understand. I really appreciate it because that type of transformation, if it happens in the thinking, I wish that they had done the similar transformation where they were the ministers in railways. But what I'm saying is, if you really want to do this, bring about a change like this, unions have to be part of it. You can't just wish away the reality. There are very strong 13 lakh member unions in the country. There are more stakeholders in the railways because their entire life is dependent on that. You cannot just say that unions are opposing, that's why you must do it, just to prove a point. Can we not work as partners? And that's what we are doing. In fact, we are having a continuous dialogue with the unions, and they realize what we are doing. And they know what we are doing it, because railway is as much a precious asset for us as much as it is for them, because it's a national asset. But they are directly vested interest in railways because they are actually working there. Their families are dependent on it.
So do you see this government, now that you're part of the decision-making process, pushing towards a big-ticket privatization? You know, disinvestment seems to have become a bad word now in politics. Pushing for privatization of Air India, for example.
So, I think, you know, as an economist, my diagnosis of the Indian economy today, which we have in our economic survey, is that at the moment, private investment is relatively weak, because what we had was these boom years of the last, between 2002 and 2010, and we relied on a particular model of investment in infrastructure, which for a number of reasons, I think, didn't quite pan out the way it should have. So the corporate sector is relatively weak, because their balance sheets are weak, they've borrowed a lot, their profitability is weak, and the banking system is relatively weak. So in the short run, our diagnosis is that we need to kickstart public investment as a way of catalyzing private investment, because at the moment private investment is relatively weak, and it's going to take some time for that to come out of it. So instead of, as Minister Prabhu is saying, getting hung up on ideologies and saying privatization, whatever, I think in the short run the pragmatic way forward is to push public investment to kickstart the economy, and that's why these two ministers are so important, because if they can spend quickly and well and efficiently, then if you combine that with the fact that the macroeconomic situation is improved, interest rates are coming down, there is a kind of reform momentum. You put all of this together, and then you can see the economy, revving up.
So very smartly you skirted my question. Yeah. Will Air India be sold by the government?
I don't make these decisions.
Will you push for it?
I mean, I think as a general rule, we all want, a government not to be in the business where it should not be in the business. I think that's a principle that everyone shares. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But the exact timing, and which ones you identify, what is important, these are complicated decisions which, are not easily sorted out by saying, do Air India or don't do Air India. I've just flown Air India, and I must say one leg was good and one leg was not so good. So what should I make about Air India? I think it should, it's something that we have to address pragmatically. But I think at the moment, that's not, I think, the top priority. The top priority is how do we get the economy back again after a long period of, decline, and the public investment agenda is, I think, in the short run, the way forward.
Okay, let's talk about what the two ministers are doing to try and bring the economy back on track. And I'll start with Mr. Gadkari, who's put out an ambitious target of 30 kilometers per day over the next few years to be able to boost India's road infrastructure. Now, Kamal Nath also famously declared that there would be 20 kilometers per day. He could achieve only about 8. What's the figure this morning, sir?
No, when I take the charge...
How much?
When I take the charge as a minister, there was 2 kilometers per day.
Okay.
Today, average is 11 kilometers per day. And within 2 years, it will be 30 kilometers per day. Already I have signed the contract of 1 lakh crores. And Rahul, you be sure about it, because otherwise it will be appropriate for you to give you a breaking news. I am 100% sure that within 2 years, we will get 30 kilometer road per day, more than that.
Okay, why don't you tell everyone sitting here, what is it that you're trying to do to go from 11 kilometers to 30 kilometers? And also, how do you reduce the corruption in these road contracts, given the fact that roads are constructed, but after every monsoon they tend to crumble, whereas abroad those same roads last for decades without having to be worked on?
So now already we have decided to construct cement concrete road. And you remember I constructed Bombay-Pune Express Highway in 96-97. No problem, no maintenance cost. And already we have received a tender from the cement industry, because a lot of cement companies are making cartel. When I declare that we will construct the cement concrete road, they increase the rate by 300 rupees to 350 rupees. Now we book cement with a transparency manner with 120 rupees per bag, without tax and without transport, cash and carry. So already I received the quantity 95 lakh ton. It is a saving of 5,000 crores to the country. And I'm giving that trade contract to railway, even Gram Panchayat, state government, central government, any department. So the first of thing, our most important priority is to reduce the cost and increase the good quality. And also the PPP model, there are some problems we are facing because people are not responding because the present economic situation of Indian contractors and investors in infrastructure is not good. So we select a new model that 40% viability gap from the government and 60% from the contractor, where our 30% equity, he will get the loan from the bank, and the annuity will be there, so there is no risk. And environment clearance, land acquisition, utility shiftings, clearances from all, that will be responsible for the government. So now it is, I feel that there will be good response from the contractor.
Okay. Mr. Prabhu, since you've become minister, you've clearly been pressing all the right buttons, but people are wondering if there's a timeline to see the results of some of the processes that you've started. You've got probably 5 years at least in government. Can you tell this audience that at the end of 5 years, there will be a transformative change in the Indian Railways experience, the user experience?
See, first of all, we are taking up projects which will produce results in the shortest possible time. We are taking doubling, for example. If the line is already clogged, there is a congestion on the line, you start to put up a parallel line to it. Whether there are 2 lines, then you put a third one. If there are 3 lines, you put a fourth one. If there is 1 line, you put a second one. Because the land is available, and therefore the project can be completed in the shortest possible time. And in a shortest possible cost, because it's not going to be, if it costs 100 crores, it's going to cost 60 crores or 50 crores for a doubling project. So this is first strategy, is to get as quick a result as possible. But that quick does not mean tomorrow. There is a time lag which has to be there, because if you want to implement any project, and therefore even if you think that a God can come in really and decides to implement it, it's going to take time, because we work in an Indian situation. The same culture, same people who have worked in so many years in the same way. But I will tell you something, we are trying to bring in, creating a transformation council. We call it Kayakalp Council. One of the top person in the country who has a very good track record is going to head it. And when I announce his name, he's already decided to join and everything, but I will announce it in the next
This is a good opportunity for you to give us some breaking news, sir. Go for it.
I know, and I will definitely tell you. That person, of course, will be working. This is one part of that. And then the unions also will be part of this. So we're not just excluding them. So we'll work together. But point I'm saying, the question that you're asking me, I'm reasonably sure that if you can go ahead like this for the next 5 years, we'll see a significant change in the railways. If you work for another 5 years, I can definitely tell you that we'll be able to transform the railways from what they are today into a completely different entity than what it is today. I'm absolutely confident about it. We really need that much time, and the time is required, because you can't just do it overnight. You know, even if I wish I should pass my PhD when I join my KG, it is difficult. So therefore I need to do it for a particular time.
I think I just wanted to say something about the importance of the railways, a historical fact that, you know, I studied a little bit China a little bit, and people think that, you know, when Deng Xiaoping came into power, what he did was that he liberalized agriculture, and then the Chinese revolution, economic revolution, began with liberalizing agriculture. But actually it's a little known fact that when he was rehabilitated the second time and he came into power, the first thing he said was, let's get the Chinese railways back on track. And in some ways, the Chinese boom was initiated by resurrecting the Chinese railways. So I'm hoping that, you know, a similar thing will happen in India, because we've just done some analysis. The transformational power of railways in India could be absolutely enormous in India, like it was in China.
Okay, let's take a scheme like Manrega, which was a flagship scheme for the previous government. The Prime Minister waxed in Parliament about how it's a wasteful scheme and how it serves very little purpose, and yet when Mr. Jaitley announces the budget soon after, he increases allocation for that. Let me ask you this, Dr. Subramaniam. Do you not think that that would be a message as well? That here's a scheme we don't believe is working. Instead of unnecessarily increasing allocation for Manrega, you cut allocation, sending a stern message that we are very, very focused on how we target these subsidies.
Yeah, so I think, you know, you've spoken about how good economics may not be good politics. But there are several examples of good politics being good economics. I think Minister Prabhu, and they refer to the fact that, you know, if you can get targeted income support to the poor, then what happens is that then you can allow prices to play the role that they have to play. And that becomes very good economics. So if you look after certain sections which you need to do and do it well, that's good politics. And so the Manrega example here is potentially an example of good politics being good economics. Because remember, I think Manrega has, a lot of deficiencies, but one virtue that it does have is that it's self-targeting. I think the people who go for Manrega are relatively the very poor. So in that sense, you are, partially affecting or making it a good, well-targeted scheme. That's one point. The second point, of course, is that the reason to do Manrega also is that after many years of agriculture doing well, in the last few years, agricultural incomes have come under stress. Farmers are in difficulty. So, again, like what Minister Prabhu said about the unions, I mean, these are all people who need to be looked after. And if you can do it well, minimum cost, well targeted, which is partially Manrega's benefit, then it's good politics, which then becomes good economics.
But this brings us back to what Mr. Suresh Prabhu said, that when you're in opposition, you tend to find things wrong with it. Nandan Nilekani was a much vilified man for the BJP. His Aadhaar scheme was torn apart by speaker after speaker in parliament and outside. And the moment you come into government, suddenly you're guilty of what you're accusing the Congress of now, seeing virtue in what the previous government was trying to do and do exactly the same, sir. Nitin Gadkari is laughing.
I think to me that's a wonderful example of pragmatism. I think if you see it's like Deng Xiaoping saying Ping said it doesn't matter whether the cat is blue or black as long as it can catch mice. The government recognized that Aadhaar had a lot of potential, and in our economic survey we have something called the JAM. You bring together Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and mobile. That has the transformational power of that trinity, and it could be enormous. And the fact that that is being pushed under this government, which was started under the previous government, I say, great. In Indian economics is becoming bipartisan. What could be better than that for the country as a whole?
Except that the Congress might soon start finding fault with it. I mean, that will also happen. But no, Mr. Gadkari, I want you to seriously answer this question. Are political parties, and Mr. Puri referred to that in his opening address, guilty of not creating an environment where you don't allow for good economics to go through? Because suddenly you start finding fault with things that, you wanted to do while you were in government, but suddenly don't want to allow happen because you're now in opposition. And you're as guilty as the Congress is on this cause, sir.
No, practically speaking, we have to make an equilibrium between the popular politics and good policies. Because ultimately, whatever the good decision and good policies, they should be properly understood by the people by and large. So sometimes there is a difference between strategy and conviction. And actually in the popular politics, you have to think about the people's sentiments. And the main agenda, the main structure is very clear. But at the same time, we have to think about the people, what they are feeling about the government. So this is sometimes this dilemma is there. But I am sure that as far as our government is concerned, we have got a very clear clarity that where to start and where to go. And as far as the politics is concerned...
So you're not answering my question, sir. I asked you about the opposition to
I feel that you
Aadhaar.
should not politicalize the good schemes and good economics to the politics. There should be unanimity between the media and the political party.
When
No, sir. At the time when we were opposition, we many times support the government for the good cause.
I think, Rahul, I think today is a somewhat inappropriate day to bring out this point because there's been bipartisan passing of the insurance bill. So I think maybe tomorrow you should raise this question. Today we should celebrate bipartisanship.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take some questions from the audience. Jay, can we have the mic across the front, please?
I think we should ponder for a moment the reverse of the question you've been asking about good economics and bad politics. The previous government, I think, quite conclusively demonstrated that bad economics can be disastrous politics. So that answers, I think, part of the question. One thing I'd like to say, this is the first time in many years that India Today Conclave is not the only occasion where you can hear ministers answering questions. Parliament is functioning, as Arvind Subramaniam mentioned, and yesterday, in fact, was the first milestone economic legislation that this government passed, and as he pointed out, with the help of several opposition parties. My question to the ministers is this. You know, when we talk about economic reforms, the media often does not dwell on the legislative hurdles which have to be overcome. And it has taken them several months to work out this path, the roadmap, which got the insurance reform bill passed yesterday. Now, there are several items where the government has ideas and has issued ordinances. Can either of the ministers tell us what is the roadmap, what is looking likely to get bipartisan support? Will a joint session be necessary? What can we expect to actually get legislated in the next 6 to 12 months?
Mr. Gadkari, they're both looking at each other.
I feel that today atmosphere is very good. The first time after our government, my bill for e-rickshaw was unanimously passed by the Rajya Sabha, and insurance bills also passed. Now the land acquisition for both bill, mining and coal, already the joint selection committee is there. Within some few days, they will give the report. And also for land acquisition, I am confident that the honorable, my friend, they will cooperate us and we will succeed to pass it.
Do you think now in hindsight that the Modi government made a mistake by bringing the land ordinance bill in the first place, by passing it through an ordinance?
Not at all. Not at all. I am confident that our ordinance was in the interest of the farmers. After the ordinance, in my own department...
But you've now diluted it. You've made 11
No, not at all. You tell me a single word about it, where we diluted. I'm asking you, I'm giving you the challenge. It is the misconception in the mind of some section of media and the people. After this ordinance, my department pay 1,400 crore rupees more to the farmers. Now two brothers comes to me, and one was insisting take my land for the road, other brother was in my land, because the rate was 1 to 4. And in my area in Nagpur, WCL, I take a big camp of the farmers, and every month at 25 we are opening new coal mine. And the production was some 35 million ton. Within 2 years, it will go to 100 million ton.
Okay, let's take.
So people are responding for it. This is not the case.
Can someone give ma'am the mic, please?
This is a question for both the ministers. Some of our states, I'm Yashodhara Raje Scindia, Minister for Industries in Madhya Pradesh. There are some issues that states have which are for both of you. We, under the India manufacturing scheme that the Prime Minister wants to do, the Make in India manufacturing scheme, and the export, we are a landlocked state, and we have dry ports. Now, how do we quickly bring our manufacturing to the regular port to take it out of the country is something that concerns both your ministries. Can you give us an assurance, both of you, that can we very quickly do some legislation where we can get a combination of both your ministries to give us quick rail links and highways to these ports to take goods out of the country? And the second question is to Mr. Suresh Prabhu. Both of you all, of course, have done an amazing job. Mr. Nitin Gadkari, I want to thank you. Since you've come, my Madhya Pradesh state highways are a separate issue. My national highways have taken off, something that I hadn't seen in 4 or 5 years. To Mr. Suresh Prabhu, I would like to say that the Chinese Rail Corporation threw open the railways to investments in stock. And they were able to raise an IPO of some amazing amount of money 4 years or 5 years ago. Would you be prepared to throw the railways into a corporation and have the corporation throw it open to investment in stock, where you could then be able to get the kind of money you need to be able to do what you need to do for railways? So I have these two questions.
Mr. Prabhu.
Today, actually I had a question day in the parliament, when normally I answer a question from the opposition, but it's very nice to answer a question from another minister to another minister. So I'm very happy that I'm answering a question to you. Very unusual. You know, one very interesting part, what you asked me is absolutely valid. First time, we are trying to take a very bold step. we are signing with each state, Madhya Pradesh included, an agreement wherein the railways and the state together will form a separate company to undertake any railway project that a particular state government feels they should undertake in that particular state. This is like, and there are about 20 states, because we excluded states like Northeast states, we are excluded Jammu and Kashmir, Delhi, because that is not required, and Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand. So if you really look at those states that now, we could probably have another 20 or more railway coming into reality. So what you are really saying, the flexibility that is now available, the state government feeling that they should only come to Delhi and then, depending upon the whims of the minister, will decide whether to undertake a project or not, that is no longer valid. We can now have a flexibility deciding what project we should take in that particular state, and that again the advantage of this would be that state can take equities, railways can take equity, and that can leverage considerably because it's a corporate entity unlike the governments. The government's ability to take loan is determined by the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act because we have certain restrictions for taking liability off balance sheet or on balance sheet. But that flexibility will be available to this new entity. So that's one. A state like Madhya Pradesh could immensely benefit because of your ideal location. Like Nagpur, from where he comes from, is the center of the country. Is the heart of India. Like Madhya Pradesh, you are the heart, absolutely. I know. So now Madhya Pradesh, so it's only city, I'm talking about a state, Madhya Pradesh, which is actually at the center, could be a hub for the entire logistic of the country. And therefore we have set up a new logistic Corporation of India, which is going to be reality. We already announced in the budget, which cabinet note is going, in which road, rail, air and sea, all of them will work together to provide integrated solutions for logistics. So if you set up a logistic park, a big one, with private participation in Madhya Pradesh, this could be a hubbing for manufacturing. Because in India is a very unique country, where each and every Indian is an entrepreneur. Unlike China, China did phenomenally well, but state had to come in and become an entrepreneur. And therefore, in fact, the efficiency of the capital that is used in China, your Mr. Shivshankar Menon, an expert on China, will tell you, is not as good as that in India. So if you just imagine, you provide this logistical support, you provide the infrastructure support, and that automatically the manufacturing will happen. But not just because of that. We need to bring in some legislative changes. We need to bring in some of the impediment, the hurdles that we have created as a government in the past for so many years, the legacy of that. And that's why we are also working on making business in India a priority for the country. In fact, that is something which will be a precursor to India really becoming a manufacturing hub. But we are working on all of that, and I'm really happy that you asked this question. And luckily, Madhya Pradesh is really blessed, not just with land, not just with very good forest, but also with good ministers like you.
And also, I want to add one thing. We now decided to form inland waterways. And we have started the work of 5 waterways, Ganga, Mahanadi, then Buckingham Canal. I will suggest you, for dry port and for satellite port, we have already formed, with the cooperation of Mr. Suresh Prabhu, the Railway Corporation. Our proposal is for the approval of the cabinet. And in our ports and shipping corporation, we have got a lot of turnover in dollars. So that is available with us. We are making an institution by which we can get loan into the dollar with labor rate and which will be low interest rate, and by which we can construct the railway and other thing. And the 40,000 crore rupees are now available with me on the labor rate, by which I can make it your railway in Madhya Pradesh. I will give priority for that.
You know, it's great to see so much passion on this stage when it comes to implementing change. Mr. Gadkari, we'll have you back 2 years later to see whether the number of roads being created goes up from 11 kilometers per day to 30 kilometers or not. You better keep that promise. And 5 years later, Mr. Prabhu, we hope to have you back with a completely transformed Indian Railways. That's the promise that you've made. We do hope for our entire country's sake that you're able to implement that promise.
So please invite me for India Today conclave after 10 years.
5 years. So you just said 5 years, you've taken double the time almost immediately. Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a round of applause, please?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Do remain on stage while I call upon Mr. Ratul Puri, Chairman, Hindustan Power Projects, to come up on stage and present a small token of our appreciation to our esteemed panel. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Suresh Prabhu, Union Minister of Railways, Nitin Gadkari, Union Minister of Road Transport, Arvind Subramaniam, Chief Economic Advisor. Thank you, gentlemen. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, can we have a round of applause? Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Rahul.